So one of the first steps on our spiritual journey with Jesus is the development of a desire to help other people. I'm constantly amazed when people start following Jesus, it just sort of starts to happen. You almost don't even need to tell people about it. It just kind of happens. And I sort of imagine it like a reservoir of love that starts to grow in our hearts, and we just open the valve and let it begin to come out of us. And the way that you fill up more of that vessel of your heart with the love of Jesus, or make room for more of the love of Jesus, is by giving it away. You can't fill it beyond full, so you got to empty it in order to make room for more to be filled in. And so if you want more of the love of Jesus in your life, give it away. And it seems to come fairly natural for many of us as we begin to follow Jesus. Often giving this love away happens either by serving other people or by giving to other people. And that's just part of who we are as followers of Jesus. You know the word or the phrase, actions speak louder than words? Yeah, that's what we live as followers of Jesus. Our actions are actions of love. We give to and serve other people as a way to show the love of Jesus to others around us. It's interesting, I find, that the more my life is not about me, the happier I get. The more my life is about giving away to others, the happier I am. Our culture teaches us that you got to look out for number one, you got to make sure that you stand up for your rights, you got to make sure that you don't let anybody else run over you, and so on and so forth. So it's really all about me, and that's the way to happiness. But Jesus teaches that the less it's about me, the happier we get. Jesus is a very countercultural person in some ways. Most of us start our journey somewhere closer to the selfish end of the spectrum. I have a graphic there that maybe you could put up, Nicole. Can you see that? So we typically start somewhere closer to the selfish end, and then Jesus pulls us as we follow him more towards that. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever seen a small child, like an infant, who was not selfish? You know, like a newborn or a 3-month-old or something like that. We are all born selfish. But as we grow, as Jesus works in our lives, we move away from totally selfish to being like Jesus. And Jesus lived his life totally focused on other people. Doesn't mean he neglected himself, and that's not what this is about. It's about giving of the love that Jesus fills us with to other people. Loving others well is really what makes our lives rich. And Jesus promised us a rich life, not a rich life in lots of stuff, but a rich life in our inner world. That sense of fulfillment, that sense of feeling like your life matters or is worthwhile. It's interesting, you know, often when we're younger, we can think, well, you know, if I get a good job, if I make lots of money, if I get social status, if I get lots of likes on social media, if I become somebody, then I will be happy. But often around midlife, we start to realize it's actually not working. And we start to realize that the way that we become fulfilled in life is actually by making a difference. That's how we feel like our lives matter. And so often you'll see people who maybe went for a career early in life that made them lots of money. Mid-life, they'll start to reevaluate, and they might change careers to a career that doesn't pay as much, but actually is making a difference in people's lives. And so Jesus calls us to live a rich life in that sense. Now, there's always risk in loving people. You can get hurt. True love actually always is painful in some way, shape, or form. But loving people, even with the pain, is always worth it. The risk is worth taking. Now, most of us can't see our own selfishness. That's the problem with selfishness. It feels totally justifiable. It makes total logical sense to be selfish. And so we don't see it in ourselves until Jesus helps us see our own selfishness. When you put your life up against or up beside Jesus' life, that's when your own selfishness starts to become clearer. Have any of you ever had this experience like I have? You think you're doing really well. You know, you sort of feel a sense of smugness that, oh, I'm a great person. And then you meet this person that's sort of like Mother Teresa. And they just make you feel like a total schmuck. Like, what on earth am I doing and thinking? Like, why on earth am I so focused on my own well-being? And that can easily happen with our relationship with Jesus. Most of us can't see it until it's exposed by being next to somebody who lives at a whole different level. And in order to grow, in order to become less selfish, almost inevitably, we have to start by looking at ourselves more honestly. We have to face our own shortcomings. Growth always starts with being honest with ourselves. And a lot of times we think we're being honest until there's a whole new set of criteria and we realize there's a whole nother level of honesty. So when people are exposed to Jesus, there's two different ways you can respond. You can run away. That's one way to feel good about yourself. You can run away and go, you know what, Jesus is just a figment of your imagination, and we get all kinds of creative reasons why we need to stay away from him. And we stay away from church, we stay away from the Bible, we stay away from praying, we can pretend that we love Jesus, but we just are playing games with ourselves. We can focus on other people's mistakes. There's all kinds of different ways in which we can make ourselves feel better about what Jesus might have exposed in our lives. But ultimately, we're just fooling ourselves. Or we can choose to humble ourselves and say, okay, Jesus, I can see that there's a whole nother level here. A whole nother gear I could take, if you will. And the humiliation feels difficult, but the truth is it's only short term. Because in the long term, we grow, and it's totally worth it to humble ourselves. We have a program here on Tuesday nights called Celebrate Recovery. One of the very first steps of Celebrate Recovery is admitting that you've got a problem. If you can't admit that you have a problem, you can't grow. And so Jesus leads us in that direction. And it's difficult, but it's so worth it. See, the more my life is not about me, the happier I get. The more I can put away all of that sense of pride and arrogance and, protecting myself from being exposed to things that might make me look bad, the happier I get. So I want to look at the Bible. Around here, we look at the Bible on a regular basis because we find that the Bible exposes things in our lives that are very, very helpful in this growth process. So I want to look at a tiny little book that's very close to the end of the Bible called James. Now, James was actually Jesus' physical brother. And he wrote this letter to some of the new believers that were just following Jesus. So James chapter 2, starting in verse 14. And there we read, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace,' keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds.'" What's he saying? Well, what he's really saying here is that we show our love through our actions. Now, pop culture has told us that love is a nice, warm feeling, and you have feelings for people, and that's being in love with them. But feelings definitely are a wonderful thing, but it needs to go deeper than just feelings. Jesus' love is very, very practical, and that's what this is about. So he transforms us from the inside out so that we do good things for other people as a natural outflow of the love that he has placed in us. Truth is, embracing Jesus' love makes us loving people. That's a natural outcome from that. If you are not becoming more loving as a result of following Jesus, there's something wrong. I want to introduce to you a new oxymoron this morning. This moron, yeah. So this is the oxymoron. Grumpy Christian. Grumpy Christian. That is an oxymoron. Does that mean that we can never be in a bad mood? No, it doesn't mean that. But if you are constantly grumpy, self-centered, stingy, the Scrooge type of personality, and you're never changing towards being more loving, more giving, more gracious, more good to other people, that is a problem. Christians are called to become like Jesus, and Jesus was not grumpy. I was saying to somebody the other day, that older people sometimes can go one of two ways. I've met older people that get more grumpy and crusty and difficult as they get older. But I've also met older people who get sweeter and more kind and gentle and forgiving and gracious as they get older. That's the kind of person I want to become. I want to become nicer to be with the older I get, not harder to be with. Because that's the way Jesus calls us to become. The more my life is not about me, the happier I get. Have you ever visited somebody in a senior center or even in the hospital, and when you were with them, it was such a delightful experience that you walked away feeling better than when you came? That's the kind of person I want to be. I've certainly met people like that. I've also met people that weren't so much like that. You kind of had to psych yourself up before you went in to visit them. And then afterwards, you had to go out for a blizzard at DQ to cheer yourself up again. Okay, I want to look at another scripture. I want to look a little bit closer to the middle of the Bible in a book called Luke. Luke chapter 6. And I want to look here at a passage that Jesus, where Jesus himself was talking. And I want to look at this because it's important to understand how other people understood Jesus. So this passage, many scholars who have studied this closely believe that this was actually Jesus' core sermon that he would preach over and over again in wherever he went. Like, it's only listed in the New Testament a couple of times, but scholars believe that Jesus actually repeated this message over and over again, almost everywhere he went. So this is kind of core to what following Jesus' teaching is all about. So starting in verse 27, we read, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those whom you expect repayment, or from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." See, Jesus takes this love thing to a whole other level. It's not just about loving those who are close to us. He calls us to love those that are really difficult to love, people that are miserable to us. I mean, we probably all, heard people say at funerals and whatnot, "Oh yeah, they were all about family." And we think, yeah, what a great person they were. Well, Jesus here is actually saying being all about family is no big deal. It's being all about people that are not good to you. Now, that is something to write home about. That's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, and I'm not saying that Jesus is saying we should, not be good to family, or, that we should be unkind to people that are kind to us. That's not at all what he's saying. He's just saying, go way beyond just being nice to the people that are nice to you, loving the people that love you. You need to take this out of that safe zone, which family can be or friends can be and so on, and go into the unsafe zone of loving the people that are a real headache to you. The people that just make your life miserable. And this makes no sense whatsoever from a pure logic standpoint. From a selfish perspective, it makes total sense to give yourself to the people that are going to give back to you, to surround yourself with the people that are the people that are good to you. And I think we naturally tend to do that. But Jesus is saying, no, go beyond that. Go take it a step further. Be good to the ones that are not good to you. And he says that's really where the rewards start to happen, where the big rewards really happen, because that's where God's blessing really starts to kick in. What he's really saying is, if you just love the people that love you, that's sort of an inherent reward in that. You get back what you give. But if you give to people that aren't giving back to you, God steps into the middle of that, and he begins to reward you at that level. And he rewards you internally. He gives you peace. He gives you joy. He gives you grace. All of those things that make for a rich life begin to flow into your heart at that point. You truly experience what Jesus said about he wanted you to have life and life abundantly. That's what he's talking about. Let's face it, it's easy to love your mother. Unless your mother is really mean to you. Then it becomes very difficult. But that's where Jesus will help you. Jesus makes it possible to love a cruel mom or a cruel dad. And when you do, Jesus will reward you, profoundly reward you. Not because you get something back from your mother or from your father, but because God does something inside of you. Jesus fills your heart. Now, you may have to love them in creative ways. You may have to love them in ways so that they can't hurt you as badly. And Jesus will help you figure out how to do that. But he does want you to love them. Loving your girlfriend or your boyfriend is easy unless they hurt you deeply. And if they hurt you deeply, then it gets really hard all of a sudden. But that's where Jesus begins to show you how to love them in spite of the fact that they're not being good to you. And he rewards you for that internally. He gives you a sense of peace and joy and so on and so forth. And maybe this is a good place to just pause and give you a little bit of an update on how things are going between Shelley and I. I said I would do that. So I wish I could give you a wonderful report that we would all cheer for, but unfortunately that's not the way things are. Shelley has decided to walk away from the counseling that we were doing together, and so I'm continuing on with the counseling by myself. I have a lot to learn yet, and so I want to make sure that I'm pursuing that and learning as much as I possibly can. So continue to pray for us. God is still able to do amazing things there, even though right now it's not really looking great. Loving your kids is easy unless your kids turn around and really hurt you. Then it all of a sudden becomes really hard. But Jesus will help you. That's what he does. He helps us love when it's hard. I have a little saying that I've told my kids many, many times and driven them crazy with this saying, and it's not easy when it's hard. Duh. It's not easy to love when it's hard. But that's when Jesus helps us. Loving your friends is easy until they hurt you deeply. But that's when Jesus helps. If you ask him to, if you let him help you. Loving your good boss is easy until your good boss does something that's not so good. And he or she doesn't treat you quite as well anymore. But that's when Jesus can help you love them anyway. Let's face it, loving people at church is so easy. Because everybody's so wonderful at church until they're not so wonderful. But then Jesus helps us to love them because we're all still human. Unfortunately, almost everybody I've met that's walked away from church walked away because somebody at church was a jerk. And sadly, Jesus was right there saying, "Here, I'll help you." But they chose to say, "No thanks, I'd rather walk away." And that's so sad. Upstairs, they're packing boxes for the kids today. And let's face it, loving starving people is easy. Unless you can't see anything in it for yourself. But that's where Jesus will help us. And that's one of the big differences between a lot of people who give to charities and people who give out of a heart of love from Jesus. When you give out of selfishness, you need people to see what I did. And we see pictures in the newspaper all the time of people saying, "Look at what we did. Look at what we did." But when you love with Jesus' love, he steps in and gives you reward on the inside. You don't need your picture taken. Nobody needs to know what you did because Jesus is rewarding you. Jesus is so profoundly countercultural. He takes people who are all naturally me first and turns us into people that are about loving other people. And when you follow Jesus, it's important to understand that you are actually blazing a trail for a completely different kind of society. We are actually breaking a new pathway through the center of a culture that naturally tends to circle the wagons around me, myself, and I. And we're saying, I'm not going down that path. I'm going a different road. I'm going a road of making my life not about me, but about others. See, because the less my life is about me, the happier I am. I've said this before, but giving money to other people, and I only use this because money is a big deal in our culture, but giving money to other people may actually be the closest thing there is to buying happiness. Like we think that, well, if I go on a nice trip or if I, buy a nice car or a nice house or, this, that, or the other thing, I'll be so happy. Yeah, you may, but it's not likely going to work. But let me tell you one thing that definitely will work. giving money away. If you give money to other people, it's like buying happiness. It really is. The more my life is not about me, the happier I am. I want you to meet Jack. Jack was a gamer, and he lived a very self-centered life. He basically spent his whole life in his parents' basement just gaming all the time. He never really thought about anybody else. His life was just about having a good time all the time. Until one day he met a gamer, and I'm not a gamer, so I don't understand how all of this works, but they started chatting while they were playing games, and this friend that he met online was on the other side of the world, but they were playing the same game at the same time. And they started chatting with each other, and this friend that he met online started introducing him to Jesus. He was a Christian. And it made Jack kind of interested in this Jesus person. And Jack had an uncle who was a Christian, and he had invited him to go to church with him several times, but Jack really wasn't that interested in church. He always found an excuse of some kind to not go. But after talking to this friend online, he decided, maybe I should check out church. So he called his uncle up and said, hey, I'd like to take you up on your invite to go to church. And so he went with his uncle to church one Sunday, and lo and behold, he met some other gamers at church. He didn't expect that, but they were Jesus followers and gamers at the same time. And one thing led to the other, and Jack started to come to church regularly and started getting more and more interested. He started listening to what they were actually saying at church, and he got, to be friends with the gamers at church, and he actually started to follow Jesus. And the interesting thing is that as he followed Jesus, things started to change inside of him. And he started noticing himself that when he was gaming, he would actually care about the people that he was playing with. And he started asking them about their life and how they were doing. And some of the people at church, he started to, have interactions with them about their life, not just about his life. And he actually started to offer to help people with stuff. And after about 5 years, he sort of stepped back in his own mind from his life, and he started to look at how he had changed. And people around him noticed as well that he had gone from basically a hermit in his parents' basement that really didn't care about much of anything other than getting his score to the next level, to all of a sudden he was living a life of giving and serving other people. And guess what? The less his life was about him, the happier he was. That's the thing that Jesus invites us to live our lives less about me and find happiness in the process. So my challenge for all of us today is, how can you challenge yourself to give and or serve outside of your comfort zone in the coming week? How can you help somebody that you wouldn't normally reach out to help in a very practical way? Now, maybe you're listening today and you're going, well, I don't know about this Jesus. It sounds really kind of weird to me. What about just trying him out? What about following him just to see how it really plays out for you? If that's you today and you're going, okay, I could give it a try, just pray with me in a second here as we pray and invite Jesus into your life and just see what happens. Dear Jesus, I thank you that you are so radically different from the way I naturally think. That's scary, but it's also really appealing at the same time. And for me, the appeal outweighs the sense of risk. So I'm choosing to follow you. I'm choosing to let you stretch me outside of my comfort zone, outside of the way I naturally tend to be self-centered. And I'm going to allow you to show me who you would like me to love that isn't loving me towards me. I'm going to have an open mind to allow you to show me how to do that and for whom I should do that. This coming week, I'm going to sort of keep my ears open for your nudge, for your whisper, for what you want me to do and for whom. I want to be like you, Jesus. I want to be the kind of person that goes a step beyond just loving the people that love me and loving the people that are hard to love. So that's my commitment, Jesus. I want to do that. So I'm trusting you to help me now. Amen.